Hey guys, Bice Bump here, bringing you this 11.2 Frost DK Mythic Plus guide. Frost DK is currently the most popular DPS spec in the game when playing Mythic Plus, and I understand why. It is a blast to play, it deals a lot of damage, it feels right, and it's super satisfying. I've been playing it lots and pushing some keys, and I thought it's time to make a video to talk about essentially everything you need to know to fully optimize your Mythic Plus DPS. We will discuss talents, stats, some gear, but mostly we'll talk about rotation and very much in depth, talking about all the small little optimizations you can do to really get the most out of your damage. Anyway, starting off, I got the talents up here. These are pretty much the same stuff we run in Raid. The main choice you do have is Frost Reaper, which I could have in these talents. You could put that in Runic Overflow, or Icy Onslaught, or Frigid Executioner. But I don't think it makes like a real difference. I think Frost Reaper is nice, because it makes us do a bit better on 2-target cleave. And it's also a better single target talent. If you sim, these are all going to be like within 1% of each other. So it's like not a huge difference. I think the worst one is Frigid Executioner. But that's nice because it gives you a bit more resources, which can feel good. I don't know. When it comes to stats, we got Mastery top, followed by Crit, Haste, and Verse. When it comes to exact values, there's no like real specific one to follow. I would just sim my character, and you can do it using a Mythic Dungeon Route sim, or MDT sim. That's the best way to do it. I'll say from my point of view though, I don't do that much simming for Mythic Plus. Personally, it's a bit of a difficult problem, because it's hard to fully reflect the reality, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. When it comes to gear, I would say there are a couple of interesting trinkets that we can run. I think this here, I'm running a very special one. That is like a very Mythic Plus specific trinket. You got the Void Touch Fragment. This actually sims pretty well in MDT sims, because it works really well when you got stuff dying around you. So it has like really, really good value in Mythic Plus. But otherwise, you have your standard ones like Astral Intent, is your best passive. You got Cursed Stone Idol as a really good unuse. You got RS Ritual Forge, it's also super good. You got Unyielding Nether Prism, super good. Lots of good ones out there, and you can kind of pick up. I think I'm running double passive here, just for reference. Okay, those are kind of like the boring stuff. Let's talk about your damage and how you do damage. I'll start out by I'll bring up like an overall breakdown up here, and we can talk about where the damage is coming from. I think fundamentally, your Frost Scythe is going to do a big part of your overall damage. And a really, really important aspect of the Frost DK is just making sure that you use Frost Scythe properly. That has related to Killing Machine. We'll get into that later, but that's like where that's coming from. We also have high Exterminate damage. This is your Deathbringer ability. Essentially, when you use your Deathbringer Reaper's Mark, when that explodes, you send these Exterminates, which deal a really big amount of damage. We also have stuff like Glacial Advance. This is coming from mainly your Killing Machine. Whenever you consume Killing Machine, that sends out Glacial Advance, which deals a lot of damage. But also you do press it manually. And then we have Breath of Sindragosa, of course. This is like a cooldown. It still shows up at around 8-10%, so not too bad. And then some other stuff, which is not that important. Anyway, that's where your damage comes from. But let's talk about how you actually optimize it. And it is all about your pillar windows. Pillar Frost is at a 45-second cooldown. Essentially, every single pack you're going to use this ability. And using it the right way is the key to doing good DPS. How it works is that when you press it, it gives you a strength buff, so it increases damage all your abilities. But importantly, it also makes your main rotation abilities generate Killing Machine. And Killing Machine is like where our damage is coming from. That's why it's so important. We have like two different pillar windows that we're going to talk about. We have pillar when we have Breath of Sindragosa up. This is like every second one. And then we have pillar without Breath of Sindragosa. But I'll just talk about them individually, because they do change the gameplay a little bit, and I feel like they should be discussed separately. If we start with the Breath of Sindragosa version, first of all, this one, you will use Breath right at start. Why it's different is because Breath is going to generate a charge of Empower Rune Weapon, and Empower Rune Weapon gives you Killer Machine, and that's why kind of like it acts a bit different, because you get a bit more Killer Machines that you generate on your own. Anyway, I would say, in very general term, when you have a Breath up, how you attack the pack is that you go in and you start out with a Reaper's Mark and a Power Rune Weapon. This is probably a bit different from what we've seen before. I just recently ran some new sims, and essentially it is worthwhile to use Reaper's Mark before your pillar, mainly because Reaper's Mark on its own doesn't do that much damage. So putting it in pillar is kind of taking up a GCD you could have spent on something else. Anyway, Reaper's Mark and your Empower Weapon. This, importantly, gives you 60 rune power. You get 40 from Power Weapon, and you get 20 from the Reaper's Mark, and that is just enough to use Breath of Sindragosa. So what you do next is that you press Breath of Sindragosa in the GCD, in the GCD that you get from Reaper's Mark. So it's kind of like Reaper's Mark plus Empower Weapon, Breath of Sindragosa, and then you get a new GCD. This next GCD, you're going to use your pillar macro with Frost Scythe. In single target, it's going to be Obliterate. So I do have 2 pillar macros. I'll put them up here, which I use depending on the situation. You can see on my action bars, that will be button S1 and S2. So if I'm AoE, I'm going to press the one with Frost Scythe. AoE here is 3 targets plus. If it's 1 or 2 targets, I'm going to press the one with Obliterate. Okay. At this point, what's going to happen is that you're going to, with your new tier set, I'm just going to assume we have that, you're going to immediately get an Exterminate proc. So what Exterminate does, it's from Deathbringer. It gives you a 1 rune discount, on both Obliterate and Frost Scythe. And it also means that when you consume it, you get a natural killing machine. I'll talk about this in depth, but Deathbringer fundamentally gives you 3 extra killing machines in your pillar window, and playing around those in a smart way is like a key to success. Anyway, you press your pillar macro, right? That is going to use up a Frost Scythe. You're going to use all your kind of trinkets, all that kind of stuff. If you have the Stone Idol, use that before you press the pillar macro. Anyway, but you have standard other trinkets, you can just put it in the macro. That's going to consume 2 runes because you use a Frost Scythe. It's going to give you an Exterminate, and it's also going to give you a killing machine because you get... Wait. Yeah, because you consume the Exterminate you had. Sorry, yeah. So it's going to be Frost Scythe, and then you're immediately going to press Frost Scythe again. Alright, with Breath, you get Empower Weapon charge, you want to consume that, so you're going to consume it, and you're going to use another Frost Scythe. Right? So it's going to be a triple Frost Scythe in a row with Breath. There's going to be Frost Scythe with the pillar macro, Frost Scythe that you consume the killing machine you get from Exterminate, and then a Power Weapon and Frost Scythe again. You'll see this because there's another period in the pillar window where we're going to do this triple Frost Scythes, but that's the general one with Breathbringer. You get cheaper Frost Scythes and you get more kill machines, so it's going to be pressing loads of them. That's why, a big reason why Deathbringer is so powerful. Anyway, once you've done those triple Frost Scythes, what happens next is that you are going to probably consume the Rhyme proc. You get a Rhyme proc when you press the pillar macro and AoE. And then you're going to reach a point where you're going to trigger your next Exterminates. So the Reaper's Mark you put up on the end, that is going to stack up over time. And once it reaches, is it 60? Once it reaches full stack, it explodes and gives you 2 stacks of Exterminate. This gives you 1, cheaper cost Obliterate / Frost Scythes, and when you consume them, you're also going to generate a kill machine. So essentially at this point, you're first of all going to make sure that you have a kill machine proc. Either you have one because you consumed Rhyme, or you have one because you used Glacial Advance. You're then going to consume that killing machine as well as 1 Exterminate. That gives you another killing machine, which you're going to consume again, which gives you another killing machine, which you're going to consume once more. So ideal scenario, you're going to do back-to-back triple Frost Scythes, all of them consuming killing machine. I think this is like, I will spend a lot of time talking about this because it's really important to be kind of on your toes with this, so you don't get surprised by these procs and end up essentially over-capping Killer Machine. I think that's one of the reasons people do less DPS, because they generate Killer Machines when you already have 2 stacks, when you could have otherwise consumed them. Okay, that's the Deathbringer specific part. In general, in your pillar window, the priority is that you're going to consume your Killing Machines as much as possible. Right, as soon as you have one, consume it. And then if you don't have one, you're going to generate. Your first priority generation is Rhyme. If you don't have Rhyme, you can use Glacial Advance. Alright? So after we've done like Exterminate, it ends, and you can go back to this like weaving, which I'm talking a lot about other videos, where you go like consume, generate, consume, generate, consume, generate. Okay. Let's recap. So how does it work when you engage a pack with breath, right? You run in, you do your Reaper's Mark and Power Weapon, you activate your breath and then use your pillar macro, and then you use double Frost Scythes. First one consumes the Exterminate, generate Killer Machine. Second one, consume the Killer Machine that you generate from the Exterminate. Third one, consume Empower Weapon Charge, right? You're then going to spend like 1 or 2 GCDs essentially waiting for your Reaper's Mark to pop. You're going to consume your Rhyme proc. You're going to consume any Killing Machines you generate. And once your Exterminate comes up, you're going to do back-to-back triple Scythes. And after that's finished, you're going to go into your standard weaving rotation, where you generate Killing Machines, consume, generate, and consume. I will say, if you have a lot of haste, be careful. Because what happens is that even though you will consume and Exterminate, the Scythes are not triggered quickly enough to give you a Killing Machine before the next GCD. So sometimes you end up in situations where you have Exterminate, you use the Scythe, and if you press Scythe immediately afterwards, you would think that that would consume a Killing Machine, but it doesn't. Just keep track of that so you don't end up using naked Scythes, because that is a big, big no-no. You would never ever do that in your pillar window. Furthermore, there's like an optimization piece around your resource level. Essentially, right, you might ask yourself, well, we can stack up Killing Machine to 2. Do you ever do that deliberately? And the answer is generally no. However, if you're very low on runes, so if you're sitting at only 2 runes, for instance, you have a single stack of Killing Machine and you have a Rhyme proc. You can use the Rhyme proc before you use your Scythe. So you kind of go Rhyme proc and then you double consume your Killing Machine. Furthermore, Prime Weapon, as I said, we use 1 charge at the start. I, in general, use it to kind of keep my rotation flowing. So, for instance, if I'm in a situation where I have 2 runes, and I know, okay, I'm going to consume these 2 runes with Frost Scythe, I know that my next GCD, I will not have any resources at all. Then I will know that, well, if I do Scythe into Power Weapon, I can do Scythe immediately afterwards, and end up in a situation where I'm a bit more healthy on runes, and can probably keep my rotation going without starting to overcap on Killing Machines. Alright, a long explanation. I hope that is kind of approachable. That's how I think about things. When it comes to kind of like optimizing your breath usage, you shouldn't really have to play in a specific way. As long as you follow the rotation as I explained it, you will naturally get long breath windows. The minimum should be 20 seconds. If you get lower than 20, you're doing something wrong. But it goes from 20 upwards to 40 seconds when you have lost and such. Alright? I would say, right at the end of a pillar window, I do like to send an Empower Weapon Charge, just for the sake of it, because you get a lot more value using in your pillar window, because obviously it gives you a free Frost Scythe next. I would also say, ideally, don't use your Empower Weapons for your Exterminate Scythes, right? An Exterminate Scythe already costs 1 rune, so making that free of cost is not as big of a resource gain as doing it on a full Scythe, if that makes sense. Anyway, when it comes to single target, I'll just mention it. The literally only thing you do is that you replace, whenever I said Scythe, you do Obliterate. Whenever I do Glacial Advance, you do Frost Strike, right? That is the only difference between AoE and single target. Super easy. Alright, that was your breath pillar window. Now let's talk about non-breath windows. So what is different here and how do we play it differently? I think, first of all, would do the opener slightly differently. So, as I talked about before, we need a lot of runic power to get our breath going. We don't need that without breath. So essentially, if you don't have breath, I wouldn't use Empower Ruben at the start unless you have 2 charges. You will notice a lot of Myth class you come into a pool, you won't have a single Empower Ruben charge. Then you should just do your Reaper's Mark into your pillar macro. Alright. Next button is going to be another Frost Scythe. So you need to make sure you have enough runes for it generally, but it doesn't matter as much. I will talk about the exact saving rules later. But then you kind of do your rotation as normal. You're going to consume, generate, consume. And then after a while, you get your double exterminate. And then you're again going to try and do the triple back-to-back scythes. Right? You won't always have resources for it. You need to go with it. But I think importantly, just know that they're coming. So you don't end up making decisions as if though you wouldn't, as if though there wasn't a scythe or a clear machine coming. All right? Cool. When it comes to going into these windows, when it comes to resources, right? I would say with the non-breath window, you definitely want at least 3 runes, right? 3 runes gives you 2 runes to use on your exterminate, and then a single one left over to use on the exterminate scythe coming afterwards, so you can actually use your pillar macro. You don't want a situation where you use a Reaper's Mark and then you don't have runes to use the macro, and then you're kind of sitting there and you desync them. Bad idea. And when it comes to breath window, it's a bit more lenient because you're going to use an Empower Rip and Charge quite quickly. But obviously, you need to get 60 rune power for your breath. So before you use the Reaper's Mark, make sure you have at least 40. You generally achieve that by using Empower Rip and Charge, but you can also do it by using your normal abilities like Frost Scythe, right? When it comes to the amount of runes, you're quite chill because what happens is that your breath is guaranteed to give you a single rune with your runic empowerment. It costs 60 rune power and that ends up as a 108% probability of getting a rune. So you always get one back, which means that you can always use the pillar macro and then you can always use the Empower Rip and Charge afterwards. So you don't need as many runes for breath because you get some when you use it in a while. In general though, it's a good idea to have good resource before you go into window because it just means that you will have a healthier window with more killer machines that you generate and consume. I think at a very high level, if you could, you would spend every single GCD and pillar just hitting single killer machine Frost Scythes, and that would be the most DPS. So we're kind of doing things in a way that gets us as close as possible to that, if that makes sense. And that means the whole thing that it's not often we would deliberately go to 2 stacks of your killer machine, right? Only do it if you have to. You might think that it does a lot more damage, but it's a tiny bit more. It's not a lot. Obviously, you get double Glacier Advance, but the scythe itself doesn't do a lot more damage. Okay, now, what happens outside your pillar windows, right? We talked about pillar windows for, I feel like, 20 minutes at this point. What do you do outside? I think the main mantra is to kind of go, I never want to press my Frost Scythe without a Killing Machine proc. And you should kind of try and avoid that as much as possible. Essentially, if you have a Killing Machine, use it on a Scythe. If you don't have Killing Machine, use your Rhyme procs. If you don't have Rhyme procs, just use up your Rune power. And if you end up in a situation where you don't have a Killing Machine, you don't have a Rhyme proc, and you don't have enough Runic power to use Glacial Advance, then you press Empower Weapon. Right? It's kind of there to bridge those gaps in the rotation. Perfect. Now, yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's the rotation, to be honest. I hope that was in good enough detail. Obviously, you've been able to follow me. This up here, that's my rotation. It's not like a kilo or anything. It's just literally so you guys can follow it. So that makes sense. But I said before, like the absolute majority of damage is coming from these pillar windows. So it's all about optimizing those. And also do try to use them. Like it is much better to be aggressive with your like Reaper's Mark usage. So don't desync. Because it's a 45-second cooldown. It's going to just come back immediately if you use it. So just be really aggressive and you will notice that I think you're going to do more DPS. Okay. Let's take a look at the actual gameplay here. We are on the penultimate boss. We won't see a lot of AoE here. That's been going on for the entire dungeon in a sense. But I think fundamentally, AoE and single target, they are so similar. It's just the abilities that we swap out: Frost Siphon, Obliterate, and then Frost Strike and Glacial Advance, right? I will say positioning matters. A lot of what the Frost DK does is in front of you. So always try and position yourself so that your Glacial Advance hit as many targets as possible in a line. Same thing with Scythe, hits in front of you. And then there's stuff like, there's like on your crit auto, you also have like a frontal. Breath is also a frontal. Everything is a frontal, right? So make sure that everything you want to hit is standing in front of you. I think that's nice and simple. All right, we're going to go and we're going to use Lost on the ad here. You can see I have my breath window ready. So I'm going to open, as I talked about before, so it's going to be Reaper Spark and Power Weapon into breath and into a pillar macro with Obliterate here. There you go, pillar macro, and then we're going to go Obliterate, Obliterate. I think I should have probably been more aggressive there with one charge of my Empower Weapon, because I did actually end up overcapping once. It's quite hectic, especially with Bloodlust, so you might do some errors. I'm going to be prioritizing hitting Obliterate here, since we are trying to nuke down this guy. I'm now outside my pillar. I'm just going to do my like standard Obliterate, Frost Strike, and Howling Blast rotation. And we're going to, fill in with those Empower Room Weapons when possible. I think a very important thing here is that, like Rhyme procs, you don't need to use them ASAP as long as you don't use Glacial Advance in between. Glacial Advance and Frost Strike is what triggers your Rhymes. So as long as you don't use one of those when Rhyme is up, you have no risk of overcapping. I think that's the main part. Alright, we're on the boss. I have 20 seconds left on my cooldown, so I'm just going to do my standard rotation, which is, as you can see here, I prioritize Frost Strike if I can't hit anything else. And doing Naked Obliterate is like at the very bottom of my priority. I really don't want to use it. I haven't mentioned Bone Grinder at all. Some people, they do quite a lot when it comes to prioritizing like cancel aura things and such. I don't know. It might be a fancy optimization technique. Essentially, Bone Grinder, if you guys didn't know, it gives you a stacking, or it stacks up to 5 times every time you use your killing machines. And once it goes to 5, it gives you a 20% buff for 10 seconds, right? And ideally, you want that buff to overlap with when your Reaper's Mark pops and you use your Exterminate, right? Sometimes you come into a pack and you're in an unfortunate situation where your the buff is just about to run out. And that means that you go into a pillar, you won't be able to stack it up in time for your Reaper's Mark. What you can do in those situations is cancel aura the buff. This resets, the stacking part and allows you to better time it. I think fundamentally, if there's like 10 seconds left to go before your pillar, you would cancel aura your buff, and that would help you align it better with your main kind of your primary damage window in your pillar. I don't do it, so it's up to you guys if you want to try it out, but that's pretty much how it works as I understand it. Okay, we are just hitting this boss. I think one thing I noticed, obviously I'm not doing that well here, but like in general, Frost DK is doing really well on single targets. Like we're super good in AoE, but importantly, we don't sacrifice any single target to do it. And I think that's the reason why we're such a good with Class Spec at the moment. I think I was doing this key a bit before. I kind of started doing more aggressive Empower Room Weapon usage. So you might see me with my pillar windows that actually don't use that first charge that quickly. I think a good reason why you do it is so that you trigger your Bone Grinder earlier in the window. So you don't end up in situations where you get Bone Grinder after your Reaper's Mark pops, which is something you don't want. But I'm not sure if I'm playing exactly along those rules here. You can see here, I have three runes. That means I can go into my pillar window with Reaper's Mark only. If I run out, a good tip is that you can always Glacial Advance when you're at range to fill in some of the GCDs and keep your damage going. And that's a +2 finished. Okay. Wow, I feel like most of these keys, I spend like half of it talking, and then there's like a little bit at the end, or like most of it at the end that's just watching. But this one I had a lot to talk about, so hopefully that wasn't too much yapping, and it was useful and everything. Subscribe, everyone. I'm trying to reach 100k, but it's it's a slow uphill battle. Upvote, downvote, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.